Well, I'd like to thank you all for coming to this year's Assessment and Planning Summit 2016. I think it's going to be a great day for everyone that's involved. We know that you all put a lot of hard work into moving forward our agenda, especially when it comes to guided pathways to student success. Personally, I'm behind this initiative and have been playing a role to some extent over the last year or so with the team as they've worked to move this forward. I fundamentally believe it's very important for us as an institution. And when you look at our academic master plan and achieving our institutional goals and objectives, our priorities as an institution, I fundamentally believe that GPS will be critical and pivotal to us moving that forward. For me personally, I was an institution for 11 years, Arizona State, and I saw guided pathways, or their form of it, really transform the institution. And I'm convinced that we're on the right path. We're ahead of many in our district and nationally, so I commend you all for your good work and hard work in moving this forward. And I fundamentally believe it will be transformational. And I'm here to support that. The framework of what guided pathways means for us is more than just the GPS initiative itself. It ties to our 4 C's and what we've done as an institution. And it really focuses on helping students move forward and help them achieve outcomes. Part of what we're trying to do is set students on a path where they really are guided through that journey. And they're able to complete at higher rates and more efficiently. But most important, they're more engaged. They're more connected to the institution, to their faculty and the staff that support them. So I think it's something that we are going to be successful with, and I fundamentally believe it can help us move forward and achieve our goals. Today, I think we've got a packed agenda from what I understand, so I'm going to hand it off now to Steve. Is it you that are taking over next? Yep. Okay, great. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm going to go, Mike. Thanks. Thank you, Sasan. We really appreciate your support. I'm Steve Budge, and I'm the co-chair of the Guided Pathways to Success, or GPS Task Force.
Good morning. I'm Carmen Newland, co-chair of the GPS Task Force, and when I'm not doing that, I'm also the Dean of Enrollment Services. Great,
and there's a lot of effort that's gone into this, and we would like to recognize real quick, would Jen Fay please stand? She's also here. She is standing.
Always.
Jen Fay is going to be one of our facilitators in the later part of the schedule today. We also like to, I can't get everybody in because but I'd like to thank Craig Jacobson for all his work over the summer in preparing for this. Ashley Steek, raise your hand, Ashley. Lindsay Pedersen, Suzanne Amaya, Yvette Amaya, who's our department secretary, and she's done great things. We thank Cheryl Patton for her help in getting us to put this together. Laura Lassiter, Diana Boland, or Diana Boland, Diana in Spanish. And then also Megan Garvey. Real quick, today we're going to focus on guided pathways to success and learning outcomes, and then tomorrow it's going to be more of a focus of learning outcomes and assessing at the course level. And that's going to be facilitated by Deanna Bolin and also Megan Garvey and others. So great. So we're going to get started here. So what is Guided Pathways to Success, or GPS? So real quick, this is going to be an interactive as we go through this. We're all cozy here. We're sure appreciate all of you being here. It's great to see this many folks. We're excited. So we're cozy, so that's good because we're going to interact a lot. So right now, if you could just brainstorm real quick, and many of us have had many presentations on this. For example, the chairs have seen this presentation a few times, and others. But we just, as a review, and also for those of you who are getting your feet wet as it relates to guided pathways, please, at your tables, what do you know about guided pathways is the question. So start brainstorming and write down some thoughts about what is guided pathways to you. What does it mean? What is it? What's it all about? And then there's paper in the middle of the table. There's these big papers. Please write on those and use the markers, and you want to write kind of big because we're going to share out. So let's do a little report out here. We have mics in and around, so if anybody wants to take a volunteer to take a first shot, what do you have written down? Anybody? Awesome.
And a mic will come to you if we can get there.
Say your name. Say your name before you talk. Thank you. Pretty please. Thank you.
My name is Julie, and the first one is Craig. Integrated Support Services.
Awesome. Okay, we have an integrated support services. Awesome. We have another? Anybody? We have one. Okay.
One of our favorites is goal or goal-oriented.
Okay, good. That's Amy Guerin.
I'm
Excellent.
Amy Guerin, teach Spanish.
Perfect. We have another goal-oriented. Excellent. We have another one?
Hi, my name's Neil Urban, and we have some couple of items here. One is kind of mapping and guiding and focusing for the students on what they need to do to be successful.
Excellent. So, very good. Guidance.
My name is Tim, and we had persistence and happiness.
Oh, very good. Persistence and happiness. Great. Thank you. Yes.
We were taken by the freeway analogy up there that's been used before, that when you're first starting out, you may not know where you're going, but you know whether to turn right to LA or left to Tucson. Right? And so you can
Very good.
you can make broad decisions at the beginning, and then it gradually narrows into what you want.
Excellent. That's great. Thank you. Anybody else?
Good morning. My name is Jim, and so we've got a bunch. So let's see here. Let's go with connects academics to career.
Very good. Connects academics to career. Excellent. Thanks, Kevin.
Yep. I won't want it. Total student experience and engagement, meaning that all facets are connected together in terms of advisement, both on the school and the departmental level, the coursework, all of that.
Great. So interconnected.
Very
yeah.
interconnected.
All the
Goes with integrated, which was brought up.
integrated. Perfect. Excellent. Thanks, Kevin. Excellent. And then we have one in the back.
Hi, I'm Bob Galloway. We were working in complete sentences. Sorry.
Thanks, Bob.
It's an advising system to focus students on their academic path that helps with degree and program completion.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you, Bob. Anybody else? Yes, we have another one. Julie.
My name's Julie. One of the ones we came up with several too, and one of them was sequencing courses in a logical sequence for the students, so they go from the early knowledge and can continue on in a logical order.
Awesome. Thank you. Very good. Anybody else? One more. Here we go.
We just had a structured roadmap to success across all curricula, regardless of department, regardless of area of expertises.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Excellent. All right. So here's, you've probably seen this. So this was part of our statement that came out earlier this year in January. We shared it with the college, and then this is our kind of puts together the whole thing, and it, I think, captures everything what everybody said. So,
Can we just add "and happiness" to the end of it?
Yes. So real quick, we need to do a couple of housekeeping things here before we move on and talk about this. First off, when we do our mics, we got to talk into it really closely, so because they're videotaping this first part. And then the second thing is we're going to be logging in a little bit later on in our electronic devices or a computer. So we just need to make sure the logins are working. So did Jimmy, for our guest, has somebody tried to log in and it didn't work? We're okay? Is Jimmy here, or did he go? Okay. We'll just do a fire call if we have to. Okay, excellent. So great. Well, let's move forward.
I think when we did the feedback from around the room, we really captured pretty much everything that we've incorporated into our statement about what GPS is. I heard someone talk about identifying goals helping students reach their goals. We talked about the clear routes to completion, the do you turn right or do you turn left to start with. That can be really big for a student who's not quite sure where they're going, but they have an idea of what they want to do when they get there. Broadly related areas of study. That's also really going to help pull together for those students who are coming in that think, well, maybe I want to do nursing, but I'm also really interested in computers. Where does an advisor start with that? This is going to help give us some direction for those students. Carefully sequenced courses. I think you're going to spend a lot of time today talking about what the process is going to look like to develop those pathway maps to help sequence courses in a way that's logical and supports student learning. And then, of course, integrated support services. We want to make support just part of the process for the student. We want to integrate the extra and co-curricular activities into the mandatory requirements into the classrooms as much as possible. And we want milestones that as the students go through their program and progress, they know that they're reaching and approaching their goal.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you. So here's the, Guided Pathways is a framework. It's a comprehensive framework that's going to help students. And so we have a little frame here of a house. And so one of the elements, these are the essential elements of Guided Pathways. Pathway maps, which we've mentioned. So we have pathway maps, and we're going to talk about that more in detail as we move along in today. And also the broad categories of related areas of study. So we're suggesting, the task force, we're suggesting that the college call these are the Guided Pathways. They're broad categories of related areas of study. Here's another way to think of it. There's going to be a lot of pathway maps that are going to be created using some of the existing sequences we have created, and then those who don't have existing sequences will be able to participate in this, will also be able to do the pathway mapping. So the pathway maps, the broad categories or the Guided Pathways are a whole bunch of pathway maps. They're made up of a bunch of pathway maps, and they're related. They have related courses, related, as we talked about the freeway where Brian Dilley mentioned, you have all these different lanes, right? And there's some commonality, and then when they go to make their choice, they go into their specific areas, but there's commonality. Oh, and one more thing with the broad categories is also for our undecided students. So the beauty of the Guided Pathways is those students who need to explore their options, it's a guided process of exploration. It does not eliminate choice. It guides choices so that the students aren't losing the credits as they move and make their decisions on what their end goal is.
Integrated support services. Just the other day, I'm walking out to my car end of the day, and I see a student and her mom. I could tell that she was fairly young, looking a little lost, trying to read the signs. I asked him how I could help them. Can you please tell me where the front office is? That's their perspective. And when I said, are you here to get enrolled and take classes? She's like, yes. And of course, it's almost 6:30 at this time. So we're kind of a little bit limited on what we can do. But the more we can guide students through the process, the more we can make all of our support services mandatory in the sense that they just happen. The student doesn't know about it. Because students don't know to come ask us if we have a TRIO program to support them because they're first generation. Students don't know to come ask us what are the hours for the Learning Enhancement Center. Because quite frankly, a lot of us outside of this campus wouldn't quite know what a Learning Enhancement Center is. They assume that if there is tutoring, maybe they're going to have to pay for it because not every educational environment they've been in before has had free tutoring. So it's things like that that we are very intimately acquainted with, that we know is there for students. We know it's going to support them and help them be successful, but they either don't know about it, they're afraid to ask for it, or they don't think that they have time to do it. And that's really the barriers we want to remove with the concept of integrated support services. We also really want them to be able to monitor their progress to completion. You know, we are working with a group of individuals, especially those that are coming to us right out of high school, who instant gratification. They have their devices with them at all times. They know exactly how many points or what level they're on in whatever game is the trendy game of the moment. So wouldn't it be great if they also could see something visually that you have made it 1/4 of the way, you have received this badge, you've completed this % of your goal, to get that reinforcement to keep them moving towards the goal. And we're looking at an e-tool that's going to help tie that together. So we have a great student information system, a little bit complicated and cumbersome to use for those of you that use it. We have other systems. We have Advisor Track, we have Tutor Track. We have all of these in place for students, but we need something that's student-facing, student-friendly, that helps them take a little bit of ownership and control of their educational experience. Any questions so far? Okay, so we talked about what your understanding of what GPS is. Now we want you to take just a moment at your tables and think about the value that it's going to have for a student who comes in and experiences a college that's built around this framework. They're not going to know you're participating in a GPS college. They're not going to know that. It's just the experience is going to look different for them. What value is that going to add for the students? And maybe if you have a moment, what value is that also going to add for you in your role here at the college? So go ahead, at your tables, jot down some ideas. All right, let's pull it back to full group. Go ahead, wrap up your conversations. Let's pull it back to full group, please. All right, this is working. Thank you guys for being so gracious to be packed in here very tightly today. I think it's wonderful, though, to see so many people working so closely together for student success. Let's go ahead and hear from a couple of the tables. Who wants to report out? Jen has a microphone over here. Steve has one at that side of the room.
All right, Jim again. And why GPS? Their success equals our success.
Nicely said. Who else? Who else wants to share?
Yeah, he volunteers and I get to talk. We thought that it would make the mechanics of college much easier so they could focus on learning instead of focusing on what should I take? Am I in the right class? How do I even figure out what class to take? So taking away the stuff they shouldn't be focusing on and letting them focus on learning.
Very nice.
Me? I'm Rod Golden. And hold this up. We believe in results-oriented and taking stewardship over the students' education. Make a difference, that's the most important thing. And we take a lot of pride. When they succeed, we take a lot of pride in what they do, bragging, so to speak. And sense of direction, and also Brian Dilly mentioned, it provides hope. That's it.
Thank you. Awesome.
It's on?
I'll get back to you.
Bob Galloway. They get better access to advising, knowledge of resources. They can self-manage their own plan. They get immediate response. This saves time. This saves money. You switch to GPS, save hundreds on your education. Sounds like Geico.
I think if the marketing department's listening, we're getting some great little taglines for GPS.
My name's Derek Borman. I'm in the psychological science department. And let's see, I'm going to read these off. Some of these sound similar to what others have had, but we felt like having the GPS in place would increase emotional focus of students, save them time, keeps them motivated, eliminates confusion and frustration, which I think I already heard, helps support and clarify goals, easier to sell our educational product, student to student and faculty to students and marketing department. Let's see, retention and completion is certainly going to be improved. Let's see, my thumb's in the way. Also being a part of the GPS, students would hopefully feel more part of a supportive community. They also benefit from individualized attention, both academically and socially. Bonding with staff and students, perhaps in a cohort type of way or something like that. This also, GPS encourages confidence and risk-taking. And I think that probably comes through clarification of goals and something that was mentioned at another table. and encourages involvement. I think that's it.
Very nice.
Hi, Neil Urban again here. We covered a lot of the same issues that we've heard so far, but there's an additional one that I'd like to bring up in terms of teaching strategic thinking, and that the students have to learn how to think strategically about their future, about the courses they're taking, about the process that they're going through, and that's something that would translate into almost anything that they're doing in the future.
Great. Great. Any last comments?
We also have added, along with the less waste of time and money in terms of repetition of courses and stuff like that, but also for with the students as well as the faculty, less repetition in those first few weeks of the course, so allows us to be more effective for the students, again, because if they're taking classes that everybody has taken the same classes, they're all coming in with that same core knowledge, and so faculty aren't having to repeat a lot of things in the first few weeks. Students aren't feeling like they're wasting their effort in those first few weeks, so that being a very significant period of every single course. Having visible leadership, that the students actually feel like there is someone at the helm to help guide them. Allowing faculty, including adjunct, to be coaches to them in their process and their pathways, because the faculty are the ones that they have the most contact with, and so making sure that that contact is effective. If we were able to keep it within the single tool, one place where the students see everything, the integration with the existing LMS system, Canvas, whatever, single place where they have access to that, where the instructors have access to that, where they can all see those types of things. And that there's a comprehensive place where it's easily known things that can be tested out of, or for both, again, students and faculty, so that those paths are understood.
Wonderful. So
Thank
I've kind
you.
of been jotting down a few keywords that I've heard a couple different times here. And to sort of summarize, oh, we got one more in the back there? All right, Dr. Adams.
Also, we thought that pathways would lead to building effective learning communities where students would identify other folks on their career path and with their interests, and would connect. One of the things I always hear is that, well, I'm so busy, I just run to class as a student, and I leave, and I haven't made any friends here. That opens up some doors that way, too. So.
Great, great. So I heard a couple times something regarding, or kind of resembling, their success equals our success. I think that was really well said, and something we want to focus on everyone's success, students and the institutions. So looking at things that's going to increase for the students, access was mentioned, retention and completion, learning, strategic thinking, and a sense of community and belonging. What will it decrease? Time to completion, cost for our students. And the other piece that jumped out at me was, in the classroom, the focus becomes teaching and learning.
Awesome. Thanks, Carmen. Thank you, everybody, for sharing out. So here's some just some data, because we're going to need to set some targets as we move forward with guided pathways. Currently, this is the taken from the National Community College Benchmarking Project, which is many colleges across the country participate and send data in, and then you do a comparison and you benchmark with those outside the state. These are not the governing board metrics, which is another one you can see on. This is a little different way of measuring. So, these are all students. These are all students. The governing board metrics, for example, they specifically look at new to college and.
Governing board cohort is new to college, and it's students who indicate that their intent is to complete a degree, certificate, or transfer. If you're used to seeing governing board metrics, the fall 13 to 14 for MCC would be about 52% of that cohort. And then the fall 14 to 15, and they refer to it as retention rather than persistence, would be about 55%.
Right. So this is all students. So this is just a little different way of measuring. So it's all students who start in the fall. So all yes.
Do you have this shared so we can take notes on it?
Sure. We can share this. You bet. Yeah. We don't have it shared now. Yeah. Actually, we'll do that at the break. We'll share the whole thing for everybody so you can all go into the Google. We'll see if we can do that at the break. You bet. No, thank you. Excellent. So, okay. So same kind of data, but excuse me, same measuring metrics, but what we're talking about is 3 years and 6 years. So this again is the National Community College Benchmarking Project, and this is all students who start in the fall. So the data points. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say this is specific to students who enroll full-time their first semester.
Yeah, full-time their first semester. So in 3 years, 26%, as you can see, in 6 years, 45%, and that's how we rank nationally. So great. And then this is part-time students, the data for part-time students. So the idea here is we want to increase these numbers at Mesa Community College. And that is what Guided Pathways to Success is designed to do, is to increase time to completion, graduation rates, and we can't emphasize enough learning, which was mentioned in here. So great.
All right. So what is some of the work that's been accomplished so far by the task force and the larger campus community? Using informed improvement, using evidence-based planning, we have reviewed literature. We've created the framework for what GPS will potentially look like at MCC. We've developed a mapping process. So we didn't want to just take all of the courses that a student needs to take to complete a degree and just put them in order on a check sheet semester by semester. We really wanted to look at the learning outcomes and work backwards. What do we want a student to graduate with? What understanding, what knowledge, what skills, what abilities do we want them to have? And we worked backwards. A team has worked very hard on that this summer, and you're going to be doing some work on that later today. With integrated support services, we've conducted an inventory of different programs and services that we have on campus for students. Right now, I think the list is at about 80 and growing. So you can see if we were to hand them a list of 80 different things they could do to help them be successful, maybe they would do the first one on the list and then probably lose the list is what I'm thinking. We're looking at our support services through a framework of loss and momentum. How does the student's interaction with that program or experience with that service help them gain momentum towards completion or actually cause them to lose momentum? We've also started to do some redesign in enrollment services on the student intake process. So when a new student would walk onto campus, they would come to the enrollment center. We would probably put them in line to talk with someone in admissions and records. They would have them fill out an application form. We'd stand at the counter, we'd enter it in the computer for them, and then we would tell them, okay, now you need to go to the next building and complete testing. That's probably kind of where the support ended. So what we did is we implemented a new student welcome room, where we have a cross-functional team of enrollment services personnel, including individuals from admissions and records, financial aid. We have faculty advisors, so Mike, Terrell, and Craig have spent a lot of time working with those new students this summer. We had individuals from the Learning Enhancement Center, some of the tutors, who during their downtime volunteered to come over and work in the Enrollment Center. And we had same support from some of our library staff. So very cross-functional in that room, multiple people with different backgrounds helping students. This experience looks very different from the student. They walk in, they're welcomed. We sit down with them. We go over step by step everything that it takes to get enrolled and register for classes. We ask them, how much time do you have to spend with us today? And then we help develop a plan for how we're going to get them admitted. Ideally, we sit them down at a computer. We guide them through the process so that they're learning to navigate My Maricopa from their very first interaction with the college. If they're not able to go to placement testing that day, we make sure that we let them know how to get to the test prep materials. We try to have a conversation with them about why it's important for them to go and look at the practice questions. and reassure them that it's not unusual for someone who hasn't been in school for several years to need a little bit of a refresher. Once they complete testing, testing sends them back over to the new student welcome room. There, we take a look at their test scores and we get them into the appropriate group advising. We have 2 sessions running side by side 3 times a day. So for a student who tests all college level, there's a session that really focuses on how to be successful here at Mesa and getting registered for classes. For students who test into 1 or more courses below the 100 level, we have our Foundations for Student Success team who works with them to help them build a schedule for that first semester that's really going to help them be successful. To make sure that if they tested into reading below college level, that they're taking that class their first semester, that they're not overextending themselves in what they're planning on doing. They talk to them about what other time commitments they have outside of college and really help them set them up for success. We started that new student welcome room 15 days ago. We've seen 855 students in those 15 days. So I just want to really acknowledge the hard work of the team that's in that room. It was not easy. The first couple days were a little bit chaotic, but I think by day 3, we kind of had a system going, and it wouldn't have been possible without the help of the whole campus community. So that's one of the things we've accomplished this summer that I'm incredibly proud of, and proud of this campus.
What are we going to do this year? So we're going to continue to look at integrated support services and incrementally, or not incrementally, but continue to look at it holistically, and then as we move forward, make the adjustments we need and apply the guided pathways to success model to what we do as it relates to integrated support services. So we'll continue that work. Also, we're looking to procure, as we said, an e-system which monitors student progress. It also does educational planning, et cetera, to help the students, so we can help the students and guide them along their pathway. Also, what we're going to do is we're going to be focusing on pathway mapping, which is a critical aspect or element of guided pathways. And this is going to take some work. So we wanted to, let's go to the next slide, sorry. Very good. So what are we going to do today? Today we're going to focus on specifically pathway mapping. We're going to look at that. We're going to show you in a second what a pathway map looks like using exercise science as an example. And we're going to focus on learning outcomes as it relates, which is an element of a piece of a pathway map. So we're going to look at that today. So that's what we're going to work on today. And great, can we go to the next slide? Okay, so what is a pathway map? And we have some big posters, 2x3s that are coming that'll arrive at 10 o'clock. So after the break, you'll be able to see those. That's what those easels are for. We're going to put those up because these, you have to pull out your super duper reading glasses or magnifying glasses. We got a little font here because you got to fit this whole thing on a 11 by 17. I want to recognize the work of the individuals. What we did over the spring is we did a pilot with 4 programs, and we learned about what we did is we applied the elements or the best practices of guided pathways as it relates to pathway mapping, and we learned a lot from that experience. And so what we've done is we've refined the process, and we've included a mapping tool to help departments map out, or disciplines map out their the pathways for the students related to the specific disciplines. So, did you get mine? Did someone hit for me?
Is there any table that didn't get a packet? And we don't have enough for every individual in the room, but we do have enough for every table. So did every table get a mapping tool? Yeah, and if you are at an exceptionally large table and you'd like extras at your table, just raise your hand and I'll walk over there.
Okay, so real quick. Excellent. So we're gonna I'm gonna just briefly talk about the elements of the pathway mapping tool, or the pathway map. I want to emphasize that this pathway map is not what the students are going to get. All right, as it is shown here. This is internal. However, let me tell you this. I've had a few students try this out. I just went to 3 students. I gave them an inventory of a student. They've tested into this level of developmental education. They're bringing in this many credits, and they want to major in exercise science. Map out their first 3 semesters. So I had a few students in. They did a pretty good job. Even as they missed a couple things in the legend, but once they had a little guidance there, they figured it out. So. If you'll notice here, the elements is, if you look to the right columns, what the students are going to see when they get on their handheld or go to the website when this is in the system is when we do all our pathway mapping, we'll have the description of the pathway map or the discipline or the major or the pathway. And then, of course, you're going to have the learning outcomes, which we're going to focus on today, have the learning outcomes so they'll know what they're learning. And also, they'll have the transfer institution degree program options for them, and then the job types, and then, of course, a link. And we've seen this at other colleges and universities. For example, ASU has a link out to ONET, and they can see what the earnings are, et cetera, and what the market's saying about a particular program. So they'll be able to do some exploration sitting right there and figuring out, just looking at this information on if they're trying to decide what they want to do. And then, of course, we're not going to go in detail on every little piece of this. We just want to give you what it looks like when we finish doing mapping these out for a particular discipline or pathway. So there's a lot of different attributes in here and labels in here of each of the courses, for example, what they mean and the relationship with other courses. Notice early, middle, later. What we've been doing in the past is we had this check sheet, and we still do. We have the check sheet for AJEC, for example, and AA, and then also we'll have their first semester, second semester, third semester, fourth semester, and we'll lay that out. And a lot of colleges and universities have that on their website like that. But the problem is the issue with that in the cafeteria model is that students have different entry points. So we have some students that test into different levels of developmental education, or they're coming in with some credits. Some are college ready, and of course we know that most of our students need to take at least one developmental education course. So this takes into consideration all students. So it informs the advisor and the student when they create their educational plan, which is by semester, what they need to take and what they're going to in what sequence. So, boom, and the key is about learning. It's about learning. It's with the end in mind, and we're going to talk about that today. When departments go to Pathway Map, you'll see you have the palette over here. So before, what we were doing in the pilot session, those of you who participated were thanks to the business department, the exercise science department, education studies, and fire science. We were able to learn from them the best way to go about doing this. So we were using Poplet, if you know, and it was pretty complicated. This is actually PowerPoint, so it's just going to be PowerPoint is the technology tool. So much easier to use, and then as we go through the pathway mapping process, and we'll begin the pathway mapping process of disciplines this semester, and it's going to take some training and some professional development workshops, etc. And so as we move forward, and we're going to work with the chairs as we identify departments to start that process and move forward. So that's what we're going to be doing this year, and we're going to do as many as we can. Yes, question. So the question is, how are new classes integrated into this model? Very good. So yes, Jen, go ahead. How are new classes integrated into this model?
I didn't even give him the eye, and he's handing me the mic. Yes, yeah. So they won't obviously be applying in exercise science this pathway right away. There are some things that have to happen. We have to work with our IC council to get the new courses approved and so forth. So we chose, though, to pathway map the most challenging of pathways, which is a stackable certification, because in the guided pathways model, they encourage that if you have students that are working towards industry standards employment immediately, and in our case it'd be personal training, strength and conditioning, that you also give them an opportunity while they are doing that to earn an associate's degree as well. And so that's what we work towards here. But in order to do that, we had to redesign our current existing structure, not just sequencing, but as you can see in the gray, adding a couple new courses. So this is future. And in the workshops, we'll be working with folks to let them know all the nitty-gritty of what means future, what means existing. But that's what we're working towards. Other programs can choose to map, and we will be doing this as well, ones that are already in place. We just are better sequencing, enhancing, and so forth. So Lindsay had something to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I'm using my big room voice here. Will that work?
The video camera.
We hope you'll need new classes, right? We hope that as you map, you'll find that you do need to add new classes. And this map is not in concrete forever and eternity. Okay, so you start with a map, it helps you find the gaps, and then you add your classes in through whatever process we have to go through to get it through a curriculum. But it can be added, things can be changed. They probably should be added and changed, so.
Excellent, thank you. And you'll notice also I want to emphasize the institutional student learning outcomes. In our case, it's the MCC's 4 Cs. They're also up there, and they inform the development of the learning outcomes, which we're going to talk about today.
I just wanted to add to what Lindsay said. We learned in the pilot that a lot of folks went in thinking they wouldn't need to adjust, and everybody came out realizing that adjustments needed to be made, whether it was something as adding new courses or simply adding prereqs or just restructuring the order of things. So.
You don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but could someone just mention in a minute or two how this would fit into a broad category for a student who wasn't sure they wanted to be in exercise?
Sure, I'm going to take a stab at that, and please comment. So, as we said earlier, the broad categories or the guided pathways are made up of a whole bunch of common or have some common aspects to them or attributes, maps. These are going to fit there. So the idea is, this is the idea, and we haven't mapped them all out, so it's going to inform us on how we're going to develop our broad categories. We have kind of an idea. So for example, let me take business. Let's just assume business is a broad category. They want to get a degree in, they haven't decided, they say, I'm going to be a business major, but I'm not exactly sure what I want to study. And there's what? How many, Deanna, how many pathway maps would be in a business? Lots, right? Lots of maps, because you take into consideration the transfer institutions, et cetera. So what you do is you map out for each one to the transfer institution a map, right? If you're going to ASU for marketing, for example. So those will all be present there in the broad category. And what will happen is that, and that's the beauty of early middle as well, is there's going to be some commonalities between those maps, right? Because they're going to need to take, and a lot of the sequences within, and some maps have multiple sequences depending on what it is. What they're going to do is there's going to be some commonality, especially those first 2 semesters. So the idea is that as they explore their options, they're still getting the credits and taking the courses that are going to help them to reach their goal without losing, with minimizing the loss of credits. Anybody? Yes. Any other comments?
We have something right here. Someone right here wants to ask something. But to add to that, so the categories inform the pathway maps, but the pathway maps inform the categories. It would be artificial to develop categories and just plug them in. It's an iterative process. It's evolving, so they'll happen simultaneously. And a lot of work has been done to look at broad categories. Lindsay and Diana have reviewed extensively other programs to see what broad categories are out there. But until we start to develop those maps, we don't want to lock ourselves into something. So.
Real quick, those broad categories or guided pathways are what the student sees. This is all about helping the student. It's not necessarily the way we're organized on campus in departments, because you could have a department that has involved in 2 or 3 broad categories, and that's fine, because that's the way that works just great, because it's about the student.
So, and I remember when we used to do check sheets, which, I mean, there's some overlap here to the old check sheets, but this is guiding them more, right? Where check sheets were just plug in.
Exactly.
What I'm curious about is how other courses outside of the ones that have the arrows are identified. So
like
the
these
bottom,
gen eds right here?
The gen eds,
Right.
because there's so many out there. How does a discipline, like how would exercise science identify, other than maybe, well, we've always heard about this course. How do you identify? When I was hearing the new course question, I was also thinking, well, there's lots of courses that get developed. Their gen ed values change all the time. How does this factor in, and how do, are there certain criteria? Is it based on gen ed values? What are those criteria in selecting them?
Excellent. Jen, you want to take that?
Sure. It's all based on the learning outcomes for the pathway. So there's a couple of things to talk about here. So every discipline, every program, everybody will go through this pathway mapping process, as we'll talk about later. They'll develop learning outcomes, and whether I have 2 students or 2,000 students interested in my discipline, it's a good thing to go through this process because it gives me a deeper understanding as a discipline of what I offer to my students, again, whether that's 2 students or 2,000, but it also gives me a deeper understanding as to what I might offer other pathway maps. So everybody will go through this backward design, which we're going to talk about after the break, of establishing learning outcomes and working backwards from there. So we are building this process into the pathway mapping process or framework, right? Everybody maps. But additionally, as part of, we have a total of 6 workshops. In one of those workshops, we are mapping out those general education courses that fulfill an associate's or AJEC that are required by, say, industry or transfer major. But in another workshop session, we're evaluating those that are not necessarily filled by any requirements. We have options there. And so we did this with a pilot study, and it worked so well. I got goosebumps in the chair meeting the other day listening to Denise in Fire Science talk about her eye-opening experience. I've heard other faculty talk about their eye-opening experiences in working through this. We actually had them go out there and research all of the courses that are available and make choices based on learning outcomes. And we hope to add to that. And what they did at the time, because nobody had gone through the pathway mapping process, was they actually looked at course descriptions and course outlines and chose from there. But if everybody pathway maps and everybody has their learning outcomes stated, then those become part of the evidence that they review to make those informed decisions. So.
Yeah, so for example, if we were to map out Spanish, for the major, we don't have a lot of students that choose that pathway at Mesa Community College, but what it does is it informs our department on, it gives us better information what we are, who we are, what we do, and then also we have other courses as well that are gen ed courses, and so we can articulate that better to other faculty and disciplines who are mapping out and need a specific culture or piece or whatever to meet their learning outcome, because they want the students to have a culture competency, for example. So
there was one example that came up after the meeting on Monday that we had, and that was a faculty member said that it would be so nice if her students, when they selected a science, that science, who's into interior design, that science go over the physical properties of, say, granite, slate, and marble, since those are the pieces that they're using, right, in their design. So many cool opportunities.
I had a question about the transfer institution degree area, where it says there's something, I don't have my reading glasses on at the moment, but it says something about how it meets the majority of the coursework to be at junior standing. So I was curious about the use of the word majority, because I wondered where MAPS, capital MAPS, fit into this as well, since we're often trying to get students, all set up for when they matriculate to university.
So there are a couple of approaches to selecting what pathway map to map, and how many to map, because in exercise science, we can map to 4 programs at ASU alone, 6 alone following those maps, 3 at NAU, 2 at GCU. So we started with this. It's much more broad-based for the student thinking they want personal training, working towards that, and then working towards an associate. So this is a scenario where academic advising and faculty advising comes into play. This does, we looked at all of those transfer programs. This does hit the majority of those programs within the realm of exercise science, but there are some nuances in the form of 1 or 2 courses. Maybe at ASU, for example, they don't require a Bio 181, but at NAU they do. So the guided pathways approach with integrated services as part of that framework, this provides the bulk of the guidance, but they do need a little bit of high touch as they're starting to make those specific selections. So, and every program will have to make that decision. Some are going to be much more straightforward than others, where it is following an exact MAP, M-A-P-P, yeah.
On that same note, I was just wondering, okay, so I know when I went to school, it was really important for me to be able to see it myself, you know, something that I can see clearly that it gets from point A to point B. Since this is a 2-year school, we'd like them to transfer to one of the 4-year schools thereafter, or unless they go vocational. But assuming they're going to transfer, which is, here we've got this idea, going to GCU, NAU, or ASU, from this point, do you have anything yet? And I don't know. I'm again, sorry if I don't know, and I'm not in the know, but that's, I guess, why I'm here. Yeah. Do you have anything, because students have asked me, do you have anything specific that says, hey, if you're going to ASU, here's your map that with recommendation courses that will fill the GE requirements. A lot of my students don't like a lot of hand-holding. They do want it guided, though, in a accessible, whether it's they can look it on their phone and they can navigate it, but they want it guided so they don't have to go through the whole catalog with all the things and read a catalog. They would love a little map of sorts. But if you're going to GCU, this is your little map. That's not just majority, but it actually says this, this, and this. And yes, ASU's already approved it. We're good to go, or GCU's. So
yeah. So sorry, Steve, I'll take it while you're walking. So to address that question, as part of our pathway mapping process, we have this motto: we're going to lather, rinse, and repeat. I stole that from Halisa Gria, who used to be with us. So, for example, again, started broad for that student to, this would probably represent the, quote, undecided exercise science student who's not yet committed to ASU, NAU, which is probably the most challenging student to work with, because you want to ensure we maximize, right, their potential for transferring to the junior level while maximizing their success on that certification exam. But there will be, exercise science will be engaging in this as part of the pilot study, of developing those maps that are specifically to ASU, that are specifically to ASU pre-PT, kinesiology, ASU fitness specialist, ASU strength and conditioning coach, physical education. So every program will be doing this idea of lather, rinse, and repeat, and it's left to them, and they know their students best and their programs, how many of those maps end up coming out of that activity.
I just want to say that some of these last couple of questions demonstrate how this whole process is going to be impossible unless we can develop the technological infrastructure to make it work, right? So one of the things that you're talking about, how many programs at how many institutions, right, for just exercise science. And then multiply that by all of the certificate and degree programs and all of that we have at this college. Imagine if we had that on paper in a filing cabinet somewhere in the advising office, right? It's just not going to work unless we find the tool that brings that all together. Right? So I keep thinking of these kind of stacked up on transparencies, probably about 3 miles deep. Right? So Steve was talking about commonalities amongst this. So you can see probably when you look at the early phase, there are a lot of commonalities in that early phase. Like we in English are probably going to steal chunks of the math stuff just straight off of this because there's no reason not to necessarily. But the farther you get along, the fewer commonalities you expect to see. And that's just not going to be manageable. It's the reason why the old system is check sheets, because check sheets were manageable in filing cabinets with people who had a reasonable number of those. So what the goal is, if you look at this, you also notice that this looks an awful lot like what might be a computer program logic flow. That's because that's really what it is. What the ideal is to have that computer system ready when we have maps ready to program into it. Right? And so these are the two parallel tracks. And mostly what we in this room will be involved in is getting together the logic that will have to go into the system so that students can use it in a way that's completely intuitive to them. So you're all identifying incredibly important aspects that to me prove why this has to be done. Right? Otherwise, we're going to be continually giving students inadequate levels of support as they move through stuff. Shereen, was that your hand? Oh, sorry. Peripheral vision, yeah.
So I guess my question is, I know we're saying to ASU, NAU, U of A, that way type stuff. How involved are they with you guys, or are you guys involved with them that, you know, as classes change at their end, they're willing to contact you and let you know at our end?
So that's part of the guided Pathways to Success model, is that we look forward, but we also look backward. So each and every respective program is working with their sister programs. So like we did in the pilot process, we called up NAU, we talked to the folks at ASU. We would hope that, but we had one hand up. Did I answer your question? Yeah.
I just wanted to check and see how this fits in with the gen ed values, how this whole process with making sure that they've completed all those values that they need for graduation. I'm sure it does, but I'm looking at the Pathways, and nowhere does it say HU, SG, you know, any of those things that we know that they all need. So how does that, where does that all fit in?
So when the pathway, so again, this isn't necessarily for students. This is vetted for our purposes, academic advising. So part of the workshop process is building the pathway with that in mind. It's actually an item on our rubric. Did you meet AJEC and or an associate degree requirements? Have you met the gen ed requirements? And then we also have to plug this into that old format, that old check sheet, which is what all the pilot programs did. And we have our teams look at it. But most importantly, ring that bell, when we go through this, it's a cross-functional team, as some of you have heard that term before. So those that were in the pilot process got to experience this. This pulls us not just out of our silos in terms of disciplines, but also out of our silos in terms of academic versus student services. So there will be an academic advisor on every team from day one to the very end. And then we have a review process at the end, just in case somebody missed something, which happened, actually. Carmen missed something on this map for me, but that happens. So we've got a lot of things in place to ensure, and again, we didn't just make this up, we pulled it out, and so that's, I don't want to give credit to us, credit to the others that have done this outside of our institution, but there are lots of safety nets in place to ensure that we are doing our best to create a holistic student, doing our best to ensure all that the why, right, that everybody mentioned, that we're hitting all of those points. So I don't know if you want to add something, Steve.
I have a question. Yeah, we've got one here, then we're going to go here, and then we're going to go back there.
Me first. As we look at that, it's awesome, and definitely students need it. One of the things earlier, a lot of people talked about the importance of engagement, to being involved, but I don't see that up there. And I think it would be really important to actually do a co-curricular kind of pathway at the bottom that says right off, hey, if you're at exercise science, you should join the exercise science club. If you have a certain GPA, you should join the honors program. If you have a certain GPA, you should join Phi Theta Kappa. And where's the service learning? Where's this project, so that they can have that engagement to make sure that we're meeting that? Because students always, at the end of their experience, say, wow, I wish I would have known that opportunity. And we should be telling them right at the very beginning.
That's a great point.
That's an excellent point. And I do know that that is missing from this map. And those are in the form of milestones. And so those definitely need to be on the pathway map, and I really appreciate you highlighting that. And that's something that we need to consider for in terms of our cross-functional team. How do we make folks aware of all that's available and how to incorporate that into the pathway map? So thank you.
And maybe it's a lower level that just right below it says this is the co-curricular. Maybe it's a whole another little map below that says this is a co-curricular map right off introduce them to these things.
That's also part of what the integrated support services team's going to be working on, is they're going to be taking and looking at when is the appropriate time to introduce that type of information for a specific type of student. Right now, this is really focusing on the academic side, and you'll see there's always a date down in the bottom. I think they started with kind of version 1, version 2, version 3, and then realized they're probably going to run out of numbers eventually. So we're just looking at keeping the most recent up to date, but that piece has not yet been layered on, but absolutely will be part of it.
Yeah, and actually what you're talking about is, we have a glossary for GPS. It is a milestone because it's defined as curricular and co-curricular. So we just need to make sure that we incorporate that into our workshop. So thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, hi. I was trying to understand, because the first 2 years of the education experience is about discovery and reinventing yourself, sometimes multiple times. And with my own education and my children's education, I try to find those pivotal classes that were very apps oriented, like the real life experience. This is what it's going to feel like being an exercise science practitioner. And now and it's good to fail early, as opposed to failing in the later years, right? And I constructed that personally. I failed a few times, remapped my career, and same thing with my children. And there's pivotal classes, and in project management speak, we were joking, where's the critical path? There should be a juncture, and maybe there's an intake, an interview done, because we should challenge them early. And if we put too many of this is the pros and cons of this, where you have it clustered so they don't waste money, they might not discover, because they haven't had those challenges early in their career, it's going to be the second year or the third year, and then that's why they don't pass or they don't graduate, because, oh, I'm changed my major. Ooh, I'm going to ASU now because I want to go be a biologist or something, right? I mean, this is what happens in real life. And I don't know how we can integrate that, but there should be milestones, like you said before, of checkpoints. Is this right? Is this feeling right to you?
So I feel like I'm dominating, Steve. Do you want me to put my mic down?
No, you
and be
dominate.
quiet? So since I've worked so extensively on this PowerPoint, 14 version, by the way, this is version, 15. So we actually have in our glossary something that addresses exactly what you're talking about. It's part of the Guided Pathways to Success model. We identify what are called critical courses. And a critical course needs to be at the very beginning of that pathway. And that critical course is part of the curriculum. And I know Julie was having a conversation with our table. Julie, raise your hand. About our critical course as an example, is to introduce students to the careers, not necessarily, and this is what you can do in exercise science, right? But in various ways in terms of how we deliver our content. Additionally, the courses, once we pathway map, and we now firmly have our broad categories, areas of study. What that does is it provides us with an opportunity to contextualize. So a student, and we're going to kind of get rid of the term college ready, not college ready, a student who enters in early on over here and is taking a reading level that is below the 100 level or English below, they are also taking a course that is paired with that. Additionally, reading and English will have a flavor of that pathway. So they are getting it in multiple and varied ways. So they fully understand where they're going right at the outset. I don't know if that addresses your question. I mean, there are going to be a handful of students who might say, my interest is, say, business, and through all of this interaction, through their reading, their English, and that first level of business course, they might discover, yeah, business isn't for me. And they will experience some penalty if they say, hop over into theater or music. And I'm one of those. I started off, I've got a degree in voice performance and hopped over into science, right? So there will be some penalty, but we hope that penalty is at the very, very beginning and minimal by offering them insight into that career in multiple and varied ways.
Great.
Everyone use hand sanitizer.
I assume that exercise science has determined the exercise science pathway map, and history would determine the history pathway map. But I was wondering if departments looking at the pathway map could make a presentation to say, you've determined this is best responsive to your goals and needs. Perhaps we have something that would meet your goals and needs better. Is there a venue for alerting other departments as to beneficial additions?
Yeah, absolutely. This is one thing that we're emphasizing for this whole process, the pathway mapping process, is it's an iterative process. So we will review on a regular basis. So as new pathway learning outcomes come out and become available, because history's doing their map and providing their learning outcomes, philosophy has mapped out and has their learning outcomes, then we would provide those to those pathway maps to reevaluate, reassess. Maybe there is a better choice or an additional choice that would also help achieve those learning outcomes. So absolutely.
Great. We have a last question here, and then we're gonna move forward.
Steve, did you want to add to that?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I really like what I'm seeing, because I've seen some progress. I've been here since 2000. But I have a question about the user end, the student end. Do you have anywhere built in there a secret shopper, a feedback form, somewhere where the student gets to come back to you, those that have fallen through the crack, and why did they? And also, when on your customer service base, where's the training built into that, where everybody that's interacting with your student, where are they being trained?
Yeah, that's a critical component of guided pathways is professional development, the training, and that's a piece that actually we hope that the e-system tool will have that support, whatever that company is, and that they have that built-in support for training. And then they also, those help tools, et cetera. And then we provide the training as we work together, because that's a key component. Exactly. So we have to keep that in mind as we move forward. All right, I think we're ready to move forward here. Thanks, everybody. Great comments, great questions. And again, if any questions come along as we move through this process, please. So today, and then we're going to take a break. Learning outcomes for today, which we've been working on. Here it is. Articulate what GPS and why it is important. That's a learning outcome. So we're focusing on learning outcomes. We had to make sure that we had a learning outcome for this, so we could practice what we preach. Develop a draft of one learning outcome for a pathway map that aligns with a C, or of the MesaCCs, our institutional learning outcomes. So that's what we're going to work. When we finish today, that's our learning outcome. Wonderful. Thank you for your comments. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back.
Okay, so we are now into the workshop-y component of our day, okay? And as Steve mentioned, going back to our own learning outcomes for today's session, there are two. One, articulate what GPS is and why it is important, and we've covered that. So the second one is what we're going to work towards achieving by the end of today, and that is develop a draft of a learning outcome for a pathway map and align it with a C. All right, so before we can start to develop that one learning outcome, if you want to develop more, by all means, go ahead. If you're an overachiever, love it, right? But before we get started, we do need to get an understanding of what a learning outcome is, because some of us might not have worked with learning outcomes, because here in Maricopa, as you know, we work by competencies. We have competencies for our courses, we have competencies for programs, certificates, and so forth. So learning outcome might be new to some of us. Additionally, if you were to actually go out and try to find a definition of learning outcome versus competency, your head is spinning by the end, because there's not a firm agreement. So we have come up with a working definition of learning outcome, and it is this: a statement that describes significant and essential learning that learners have achieved, right, and can reliably demonstrate at the end of a course or program, right? So assessment is kind of built in, is built into here. So put in words that are just a little bit more straightforward, learning outcomes identify what the learner will know and be able to do, right, by the end of a course or a program or degree or certificate. So how does that relate to our competencies that we already have in existence? Well, we and others view good outcome statements as complex enough to embody significant learning and can be thought of as an accumulation of competencies. So to be able to do, I must know, I must understand, I must be able to explain, I must be able to apply, I must be able to analyze, evaluate, right? So it's much more, these accumulate, these outcomes, accumulate competencies. So why start the pathway mapping process developing learning outcomes? When we engage each of the disciplines and areas in the pathway mapping process, this is workshop number 2. Workshop number 1 is just what is GPS and why GPS. But we get right into learning outcome development, and we go out, and before that workshop we have to do a little bit of homework, and we come in ready to go. So why start the pathway mapping process developing learning outcomes? Well, because we want to design with the end in mind. And what do we mean by end? Well, by end we mean, what do we want our students to be able to do in their chosen transfer program? For example, kinesiology at Arizona State University. What do they have to be able to do there? What are we responsible for in here? Or what do they need to be able to do in their chosen career? We need to think about that first, because that informs our outcomes. And our outcomes being in the form of our institutional outcomes, which are our 4 C's: communication, critical thinking, civic engagement, cultural and global engagement. And I know that we are very familiar with those. And then taken together, what a student needs to be able to do in their career, their chosen career, their transfer program, along with those institutional outcomes, that informs our pathway map outcomes. And from there, we sequence the knowledge, skills, habits of mind to achieve mastery of those outcomes, to ensure that they truly, when they leave this institution, are able to do what we intended for them to do. So why design with the end in mind? This overlaps a lot with everything that Steve and Carmen were talking about earlier today. We want to ensure, as I just mentioned, that students develop the knowledge, skills, habits of mind to ensure their success in that chosen transfer program and or that chosen career. Additionally, we want to ensure deeper learning, that this knowledge, those skills, those habits of mind are not simply touched upon, but they're built upon across the curriculum. It also leads to informed educational decisions. So a student knows before they even enter a given pathway what they'll be able to do at the end of that educational journey. They know where they might transfer to successfully, specifically not what institution, but what program. They also know what career they're being prepared for, so they can make those more informed educational decisions. And research suggests that persistence is higher when students can see the connections among courses and between a given pathway and employment. And our e-system will require it. That's part of the process of selecting an e-system. We want an e-system that is comprehensive. So a student will see the institutional learning outcomes. They'll see the pathway map learning outcomes. They'll see the career options. They'll see the transfer program options. Everything we input into that complicated PowerPoint slide we were talking about earlier, that will be part of the e-system. And I think Andy gave the greatest visual. A student has a cell phone, right? And they say, I'm interested in something in health, right? And all the options are there in front of them. And they can drill down and drill down and drill down. Why? Because we have everything at the outset. And Higher Learning Commission requires it as well. The Higher Learning Commission requires that learning goals be clearly stated for the institution, for the program, and for our courses. So this is just following good standard process. And last but not least, as we talked about earlier, by everybody going through this process, whether my discipline has 2 students interested in it or 2,000 students interested in it, we gain a deeper understanding of who we are and what we provide to those students. And those students being those within my discipline, but also, again, those students outside of my discipline. I know in exercise science how I can contribute to students in any other program. So are you convinced? No, I'm kidding. I always like to say that. I'm kind of a soapbox person when I lecture, or when I teach. So we're going to move into another activity. We're only going to take a few minutes because I don't want everybody to hem and haw on this question. But if you're in a service area, you're going to hang tight. So a student approaches your discipline or program and says to you she wants to or he wants to earn a degree or certificate in. I want you in a moment to discuss with each other, how would you fill in that blank? Because we're going to look at transfer programs, industry standards in that one area to keep things simple, sweetie, for today, because we only have till 2 o'clock. So we want to make one choice, and we're going to work from there. So you have, you don't need to write it necessarily on your, actually you do, sorry. You have those flip chart sheets, and you've got a marker. So just at the very top, you're going to make a decision within your discipline area. What is the answer to this? A student approaches your discipline or program and says he wants to earn a degree or certificate in, fill in the blank. Go ahead and get to it. Okay, so we're going to move on. So if you're still discussing, that's okay. We'll have some more time here in a moment. And it might actually help you better fill in the blank. As I was mentioning to another table, this whole process is iterative. Nothing is written in stone, and that's actually good practice, right? I can't tell you how many times exercise science adjusted their learning outcomes after mapping backwards, right? It is an iterative process because as we do this, we learn more about ourselves and more about our students and more about what's out there. So don't feel locked in, especially because, again, today's just about the journey. All right, so what our next task will be is to answer this very question. So now that we know I'm working towards a certificate in, who wants to share? Anybody doing a certificate in here? Okay, shout it out. Real estate, perfect. Now I need to ask myself this question. What do students need to be able to do out there that they need to learn in here? Now that I know I'm working towards a transfer program in project management, okay, certification. What about a transfer major? Is there a transfer major in that? Okay, so, did you go specific or just we stayed broad with business? Oh, I see. Thank you for clarifying. Okay, so a transfer major in project management within business. Yep, perfect. I need to figure out what do students need to be able to do out there that they need to learn in here. Make sense to everybody? All right, good. So, what'd you say? Yes, so thank you for bringing that up. We are, yes, getting there, but we'll just talk about it now since you brought it up. No, that's why you're here, Lindsay, is to keep me on target. So, because I probably would forget. All right, so now, if you're in a service area, we'll talk about this right now, you play a critical role, and that is contributing to pathway program learning outcomes, but also our institutional learning outcomes. Right? Communication, critical thinking, civic engagement, cultural and global engagement. So what do students need to be able to do out there? Out there is outside of Mesa, but out there is also outside of your respective area, right? That they need to learn in here, whether that's financial aid, academic advising. What knowledge, skills, and habits of mind could you teach them, right? Then that is driven by the learning outcomes you have developed, okay? All right, so in order to answer this question, what do students need to be able to do out there that they need to learn in here? We need to look at what informs this question. And for today, we're going to keep it simple. So what informs this question, first and foremost, are these 3 broad categories. So transfer majors, if I filled in the blank with a transfer program. Industry standards, if I filled in the blank with a certificate or associate's degree that leads directly to employment. And then for everybody, whether I am service in the classroom, MesaCC's 4 C's, okay? So using exercise science as one example, I would, if I am creating a pathway, and this is what we use to inform the PowerPoint that you saw earlier, if I'm creating a pathway to fitness and wellness specialist, we're going to keep things simple for today. We're going to pretend all of our students are transferring to Arizona State. For sake of time, right, everybody is going to ASU, and I'm going to show you how to get to those major maps, not MAPP, but just MAP. So you can take a look at that and review that that they're sequencing. What I would do in exercise science, if I am mapping out a pathway, I want to know what do they need to be able to do to be successful in the 300 and 400 level in fitness and wellness specialist, that bachelor pathway. That's what I would look at. If I were mapping directly to industry and exercise science, I would go to, oh yes, sorry. Yeah. No, I'm not online. I will be, though, momentarily.
Well, the thing is, I guess where my questions have been coming has been when you see the bottom, humanities and global awareness, are there courses listed there or is it open-ended?
It depends on the pathway map for ASU's purposes, right? So if they have created choices, then it's listed there. It'll say preferred, and they'll list the choices. If they have not taken the time to decide what would enhance their learning outcomes, then that's not in there. And I'll leave it at that. This path is their pathway map, not our pathway map, if you get the hint. All right, so anyways, we would look at the 300 and 400 level to see what are we responsible for, right? What does the student need to learn in here that they can do out there? If a student is going directly into employment, they want to be a personal trainer, an effective personal trainer, then we would look to industry standards, and one of our standards is the American College of Sports Medicine. They would take that certification test, so we need to ensure that we are preparing them to be successful on that test and successful in the career. So we would do our research and look at various certification exams, various standards within industry, and ensure that that's informing our outcomes. And then last but not least, again, the 4 C's, okay? So we're going to engage in a brainstorming activity. So we're going to review the relevant industry standards. And some of you know exactly where to go for that. If they're going right into industry, or if there's a transfer, you're going to review ASU's transfer majors. So I'm going to walk you through. It was BYOD, right? Bring your own device today. If you have a laptop, you're going to want to log in under guest. Okay. If you have a cell phone, I believe you can just hop right on. But we're going to go to the ASU major map. So I'll walk everybody through that. Again, this is just to keep things simple for today. So I'm going to first go to ASU's main homepage. It's www.asu.edu. And facilitators, if you don't mind floating around to make sure nothing is, I don't go too fast. I'm then going to click on academics. And really only one person in your group needs to do this. Once I click on academics, it's not so clear. I have to actually scroll down. You would think the page would change, but it doesn't. I'm then going to click on degree programs. Okay, I can definitely slow down. So asu.edu, click on academics. Academics is right here on the banner. Once I click on academics, I'll scroll down, click on degree programs. And once I click on degree programs, I click on undergraduate degrees because that's what we're working towards. And once you're there, you can do a couple of things. You can search specifically by keywords. That's what I would recommend. Or if you think you know what it might be under, then click on the image. So I'm going to use biology as an example. I was always curious, what does ASU have under cool majors? Guess what? Yes, biology. So they actually have environmental science biology under cool majors. So it might not be intuitive, the click of the picture, so you can do a simple search, okay? But I'm not going to set you loose just yet. I just wanted you to get to that location first. Is everybody there? Or is the majority of us there? Lost my place in my PowerPoint. All right. There's my mouse. Okay. All right, so now that you're there, once I set you loose, that'll be step one, right? Look at those major maps at ASU, look at those industry standards, and remember our 4 C's, okay? Then and only then are we ready to do this. We're gonna brainstorm on that question. What do students need to be able to do out there that they need to learn in here? Okay, and we're gonna use those major maps, industry standards, and MCCs to 4 C's to inform that answer. The other thing I want you to alert you to is, can I have everybody's attention so we don't miss this? You have on your table Bloom's taxonomy, a handout for that. When we are brainstorming, we are always going to start with an action word. And we want that action word to be a word that is an application or higher on Bloom's taxonomy. So we want to make sure that that is our approach in this activity. And then we also need to follow the rules of engagement. So the coaches right now are going to hand you a handout that is rules of engagement. So you don't have to worry about memorizing, yeah? And there's not one for every person, but there is a pack for every table. So our rules of engagement for brainstorming, and this is how this is going to work. 1, we're going to begin every answer with an action word. Again, application or higher on Bloom's taxonomy. 2, no single word answers. Assess, design, evaluate. You get that. It's too simple. Read each answer aloud as you place it on the chart. So how are we going to do this? Can I borrow your Post-it notes? So every table has a basket, and there is a packet of Post-it notes for every group, every discipline that's at the table. It doesn't matter what color you choose. Choose one color, go with it. You're going to put your answer on the answer to the question, what do students need to be able to do out there that they must learn in here, on your Post-it note. I know it's small, but we don't have to be too lengthy. We're just brainstorming. And you will plop it on one of your flip charts, the one that has your certificate or degree that we're working towards on it, okay? So using exercise science as an example, I might plop up there, explain the biological processes underlying human movement. Explain the psychological processes underlying human movement. Assess movement and fitness. Locate and interpret research within the discipline. Evaluate research within the discipline. Design an exercise program. Instruct an exercise program. Explain the role of culture in physical activity. So I'm going to write them on these Post-it notes, plop it up. We're not going to judge ourselves. Obviously not each other. I don't think anyone in the room would do that, right? But we're not going to judge ourselves. Just put it on your Post-it note. State it as you put it up. Everybody plays, everybody writes, everybody provides input. Okay? Not yet. Is it 12 o'clock? Where are we? No. Good. I'm like, why does it say lunch? All right, so, yeah. So we are good on time. That's fantastic. So you may begin. We're going to give you about 20 to 25 minutes to do this.